After years of vilifying men for their toxic masculinity, patriarchal aspirations, and general sloppiness around the house, feminists are beginning to ask, where are all the men? In many parts of the country, violent attacks against women are up, and many women are blaming men for not protecting them, while simultaneously shaming them for possessing the types of traits that make men stupid enough to risk physical harm in their honor. Whereas in the past, insulting someone's mother might get you punched in the nose, today a man will more likely just lecture you on how it's bigoted of you to assume he was birthed by a woman. In the feminist utopia, men no longer need to act like men because men attack women. So when men act like women, they no longer attack, and therefore there no longer needs to be men around, which is good because men are sweaty and bad, and women are paragons of virtue with no faults. Except that they can't protect themselves and therefore have to rely on men, which is bad because men are bad. And women need men like fish need a bicycle. Except for protection, in which case women need men like fish need water. I'm Tyler Chrestman. Welcome to the Chrestman Conversation. Okay. Today on the podcast, we're going to talk about what happened to men and why it's a bad thing for society when men are no longer men. It's kind of more of a philosophical thing today than something in the actual news. So we are going to touch on something in the actual news. I want to start by showing a tweet here. Blah, blah, blah. It's actually a series of tweets, so bear with me. So this came out yesterday. This is from the Women's Caucus of New York City. For those of you who are just listening, it's a tweet or a post, I guess now on X, from the Women's Caucus, which I guess is a group of New York City legislators. And here's what it says. It says, "We are deeply disturbed and concerned about widespread reports of attacks against women in New York City that have been confirmed by the NYPD. We are calling on the NYPD for an immediate and comprehensive investigation into these incidents with transparent updates to the public." And then they put out, it's actually a link to a bigger post that they put out that basically says, "Amid an alarming trend in violence against women, this kind of violence is reprehensible." Okay, so let's start off by saying what should be the obvious point is violence against women is bad. Okay, violence of any kind is bad. Violence is not a good thing. It's a bad thing. Bad. The reason why we're talking about this is because this was then reposted by one of the council members who belongs to the Women's Caucus. This is Council Member Amanda Faraz, F-A-R-I-A-S. Faraz, I guess is how that's said. She is the majority leader on the New York City Council and a council member of District 18 in New York City. So she put up a post. She quoted this and then put up a post that said, "Where are the men calling this out?" And then the comments on this are what I wanted to get into because it is pretty hilarious when you look at the comments, because the comments on this basically are all the same. It's what I'm going to talk about today, and it's with this. The first one, and these are people that I follow, these first two guys, Cernovich, who said, "They try not ending up like Daniel Penny." And then below that, Clifton Duncan, who is great, you should check him out, says, "You're strong and independent and don't need no man. You got this." And then if you keep scrolling down, it has a bunch of pictures of this gentleman. This is Daniel Penny. And it just goes down and down, and you'll just see post after post about Daniel Penny. Who is Daniel Penny? I don't remember if we actually did a thing on this when this was big in the news. But here's somebody else who quoted that same council member, Amanda Faraz. It says, "I continue to be heartbroken and outraged by the death of Jordan Neely and the lack of justice. The Black Caucus of New York stands together in demand for justice for Jordan and to pay attention to the systems that failed him so we do not lose any more black New Yorkers to senseless violence." So why are we talking about this? We're talking about this woman because she is the epitome of what I was making fun of in the intro. This is a woman who is saying, where are the men who are calling out this violence against women? Well, you don't want protection. The people have actually criminalized protecting yourself because there's an inversion of justice that is happening right now where you have to worry about what happens when you defend yourself more than the criminal has to worry about being a criminal. This is a problem. This is a big problem. So for those of you who don't remember Daniel Penny should be a hero for how you would want people to behave. Daniel Penny was the guy who choked Jordan Neely on the subway after Jordan Neely was acting like an insane person, because Jordan Neely was an insane person. And he is currently I don't know if the trial's underway, but he was arrested. He was charged. They are trying to throw him in prison for Jordan Neely dying because Daniel Penny put him in a chokehold on the subway. Now, this is ideal. Councilwoman Faraz, she wants Daniel Penny in jail. The guys, the men, when men were men and they used to protect women, it used to be that if you were some creep, if you were some scumbag, if you harassed women, if you beat women, if you beat anybody, what you wanted was men to step up and protect you and do something to defend you. This is what we used to want to happen. Now, you can't do that. People you put your head down, you mind your business, because there's a chance that you're the one who winds up going to jail. And this is an inversion of justice. This is not the system that we are supposed to live in, but this is the way that it is right now. Jordan Neely, they'll say, was mentally ill. I don't doubt that he was. The system failed him because he died when he was having a mental health crisis. Okay, yeah, fine. However, being mentally ill does not give you a license to be a violent criminal. What should have happened is, on any one of Jordan Neely's previous 42 arrests, he was arrested 42 times, he should have been thrown in prison. But these people who say that there's an over-incarceration problem, they're wrong, but they say that there's an over-incarceration problem. They're the same people who let people like Jordan Neely out on the street to randomly punch women, which, by the way, he had a warrant out for his arrest for doing. He punched I believe it was an old woman, it could have been an old man, but he punched an old woman in the face a week prior to this altercation that led to his death on the subway. He's one of the people that she's talking about, and she's mourning his death. Why? Because he's schizophrenic, because he's a drug addict, because he's homeless and died, because he's black? You're going to be upset about this? He was a career criminal. Daniel Penny, by the way, is not. He's just a guy who saw this person acting psychotic on the train, threatening, harassing people, yelling, screaming, making everyone feel unsafe. And then he and two other people who were, I believe at least one of them was black, held down Jordan Neely. They said, call the police. They tried to resuscitate him after he stopped breathing. And these guys are now the ones who are going to get in trouble because Daniel Penny is white, Jordan Neely is black. Therefore, people are saying it's racism. Racism, it's vigilante justice. Jordan Neely didn't deserve to die. Sure, he threatened a whole bunch of people and made everyone feel unsafe. He talked about how he didn't mind going to jail and threatened to kill people. Oh my gosh, look at this. People watching right now, the camera just got smacked. My cat jumped up on the bed, or jumped up on the desk here. My goodness. So Jordan Neely, I don't want Jordan Neely to die. I'm not wishing him that he was dead. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the same system that these people set up, that they say failed Jordan Neely, they're setting it up because they allowed Jordan Neely to be on the street when he was mentally ill and violent. He should have been arrested and kept in jail. That's how you fix this problem. You want less people to die from vigilante justice. You want less people to die in altercations with police. Well, when the police arrest them the first time, they should go to jail. It's very easy not to break the law. People seem to think that it's just, you just fall into this trap where you constantly have to break the law. Oh, Jordan Neely was arrested 42 times, but that's because he was unhoused, and it's hard to not break the law when you don't have a home. Okay, whatever. That's a weird argument. I've managed to live 33 years of my life with very minimal interaction with law enforcement. If I was 33 years old and I had 42 arrests, you'd say that guy has a problem, because it's very easy to live a life that you interact with the law infrequently. If you have 42 arrests, chances are you're not a good person, because the law is the law. It's not always moral. It's not always just, but the law is the law. It's very easy to stand on one side of the law. If you think the law is immoral, if you think that something is immoral, and I encourage you to stand up against it, try and change it. That's fine. But punching an old woman in the face, threatening people on a subway car, that's the world that Councilwoman Faraz wants to live in. Jordan Neely's the victim because he doesn't have a house. Jordan Neely's the victim because he's poor. Jordan Neely's the victim because he has mental health issues. Well, I'll tell you what, when you're a violent person, I don't give a shit about your mental health and what kind of state you're at. I saw people, there's a news story going around about this woman who left a 3-year-old toddler at home because while she went on a 10-day vacation, and that toddler died. And then people are defending the woman, saying, well, she has mental health problems. She was having a break, blah, blah, blah. Defending this woman. That toddler starved to death and died in a house. And people will defend the mother on the basis of the fact that she has mental health issues. I don't care at all. Throw her in prison for life. Lock her in a room without food for 10 days. That should be her punishment. The idea that having a mental health problem means you just get to carte blanche, do whatever you want in the world. It does not mean that. And the people acting like Jordan Neely's the victim, the people acting like the violent criminals are the victims because they've been arrested. Oh my gosh. They had interactions with the police, therefore they're the victim. They're unhoused and they were arrested. It must be the fact that the police are bad. That's not the way it works. Violent criminals are going to be violent. And what you want is people like Daniel Penny. What you want is people who step up and protect everybody. They say, oh, well, Jordan, he didn't hurt anybody. He didn't hurt anybody that day because of Daniel Penny. When a person is loud, violent, aggressive, threatening, saying things like, they're saying, oh, he just was yelling because he's hungry. And he said, I want food. I need water, blah, blah, blah. And then he said, well, I don't mind if I go to jail. I'll do this and I'll do that. Yes, that is scary. It's scary to people trapped in a metal tube underground with you. You don't get to frighten other people with your actions and words. You don't get to be threatening. There's a difference between free speech and threatening behavior. Here's something that people don't understand about violence. And listen, when I say this, you have to understand what this means, what I'm about to say. You have to understand what it means, and I'll try and explain it afterwards. I consider myself a man of violence. What does that mean? Well, I spent a good portion of my life I doing wrestling, boxing, jiu-jitsu. I trained with my gun. I've taken classes specifically for things like weapons, knife retention, or gun retention classes. I've done all this stuff. I consider myself a man of violence. What does that mean, though? It doesn't mean that I like violence. It doesn't mean that I ever want to fight. But what it means is I am very conscious of the fact that there is violent people. There are violent people in the world. There is violence in the world, and you have to be prepared for it. I am one of those people. It's stuff that I enjoy this stuff. I don't expect everyone to be like me. I enjoy this stuff. But what you want are people like Daniel Penny who understand violence and realize that the first thing that happens in violence is that you get aggressive. People act aggressive. They get aggressive. They invade your personal space. So, for example, if I'm on the street and someone's yelling at me, someone's yelling or someone's acting crazy, they're having a psychotic break, and they're 5 to 10 feet away. Okay, I have to worry about them if they have a weapon, if they have a gun, if they have a knife. I have to worry about this because you have a knife, you can close distance very fast. You have a gun, you can pull it out and shoot me. But I'm not going to be overly concerned about a person who is away from me. Now, if a person invades my personal space, if they get within arm's length distance, that's fighting territory. If you're acting aggressive and you get within an arm's distance of me, I'm going to hit you. I'm going to hit you. I'm going to take you down. I'm going to control you. I'm going to call the police. Because the only reason that people close distance is when they mean you harm. You do not get to invade my personal space when you're acting aggressive, because then it's on. Then it's a different thing, because now all of a sudden, now you're threatening me. Now you are in my personal space. You are threatening my safety, and I have to react. My concern now, as a person who is aware of how violent things happen, is that someone threatens me, someone's yelling at me, someone's upset with me, they close into my personal space, I recognize the danger, I neutralize the danger, and then I have to defend myself because I will be the one on trial for dealing with this threat. This is exactly what would happen in real life. This is exactly what's happening to Daniel Penny. The idea that men who are aware and prepared for violence have to worry more. I have to worry more That's exactly right. I have to worry more about the repercussions of defending myself and my rights than I do about the dangerous person on the street. The dangerous person on the street doesn't normally concern me. In a some sort of fight, some sort of melee in the street, if someone wants to come up to me, I'm not worried about that person. I don't worry about many people. I'm not going to worry about some guy who wants to come up and try and fight me. I'm not worried about him. What I'm worried about is the aftermath of that and having to then defend myself for defending myself. I don't go out. I never in my life want to fight anyone in the street ever again. Never, ever. I've been in fights when I was a kid, but as an adult, I don't want to fight anybody because I recognize that every fight is dangerous and every fight could be life-ending. And in every fight now, you also have to worry about the legal consequences, not only your physical harm, but the legal consequences of defending yourself. It's like that in many places in the world, especially in very liberal cities where you are not the victim when you are the victim of violent crime. You're the victim if you meet a pre-described set of circumstances. If you're one of the unhoused, if you're homeless, if you're black, if you're gay, if you're one of these victim classes, then you are already the victim. You see it all the time with the police interactions, with shootings. You saw it in this Jordan Neely case. Jordan Neely's the victim to people. Jordan Neely, 42 prior arrests. Jordan Neely punching random old women on the subway. Jordan Neely yelling and threatening people on a subway car. Jordan Neely's the victim. Why? It makes no sense to any rational person, but they act like it is. Councilwoman Faraz will act like Jordan Neely's the victim because Jordan Neely meets a pre-described set of circumstances. Jordan Neely is black. He is poor. He is homeless. Therefore, the system failed Jordan Neely. Jordan Neely was a violent criminal because the system failed him, not because Jordan Neely is a violent criminal. This is not how you set up a system to work in the United States. The right to self-defense is one of, if not the most fundamental rights that we have. You don't get to hurt people. You don't get to make people feel uncomfortable with your actions or words like they're physically threatening. You can be mean. You can say whatever you want. You can call me all the names in the book. You can do whatever you'd like with your mouth. But you don't get to threaten me. You don't get to say that. You can call me nasty names. You can say nasty things. You don't get to then say, and I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kick your ass. I'm going to walk over there, and I'm going to beat you down because now you're threatening me. And threats are not protected speech, and they shouldn't be protected speech. You do not get to threaten people with violence. So if we're on the street and you start threatening me, I'm going to take you seriously. You don't get to threaten me. You don't get to say I'm going to hurt you in any way. You can say, again, all the mean, nasty things that you want to me, I got thick skin. I'm going to brush it off. I'm not worried about you and your stupid opinions. But when you threaten me, it's a different thing. When you close in on my personal space, we're not talking about your freedom of expression. We're not talking about your right to protest. If you close into my personal space while you're being aggressive, while you're threatening me, that's a fight. Then I'm going to defend myself, and you're going to wind up on the losing side of that, I promise you. And that's how men should behave. That's how men should think. You need to be able to do this. And the women out there who are saying, they're the ones who will talk bad about this behavior as if it's a bad mindset to have. I'm very safety conscious. This is one of my things. I am very aware of my surroundings. I'm very aware of what other people are doing. This is that part of your brain that you need to learn how to reactivate because you have been acclimated to a very safe environment, which is fine. It's good. We like that there are laws. We like that there are people out there. We like that we live in a relatively safe society. But because of that, most people are unaware of how prevalent violence can be. Women like Councilwoman Faraz, she is one of those people who will criminalize protecting yourself and then ask why the men don't protect women from being punched randomly in the street. Women are the victims of violent crime because there's a disproportionate balance of power. The average man is going to be stronger than the average woman. He's going to be more physically able to overpower the average woman than vice versa. You don't see a lot of women who can physically overpower their male counterparts. And a very anecdotal example of this. I recently bought a grip strength measuring device, and I thought it'd be fun to take it around and have a bunch of people. I had 100 men use this little test, and then I had about 20 women do it. The strongest woman basically beat the lowest guy on the list, but the average guy, and these are people who work out to people who never exercise, people who are in their 50s to people in their early 20s. I had a giant range of guys who use this grip strength measuring device, and none of the women could touch the lowest guy, came even anywhere close, except for the best woman, and she only beat the bottom one guy. So you say that's just an anecdotal example, but it's true across the board everywhere. There are exceptional women in different areas. But you look at a boxer, a very famous boxer, what was her name? Christy Martin. Christy Martin was a very famous boxer, one of the best female boxers who ever lived. Her husband was not. And yet he wound up going to jail because he was sued, or I actually don't remember if he went to jail or if he was just sued. But there was this big thing where she was abused by him in the relationship. And this came out later that she was in a very physically abusive relationship with this guy who just was like a regular guy. And she's one of the best female boxers of all time. It's just a little example, but there is a disproportion of physicality between men and women. And then women, they're asking, well, why won't the men protect them? And it's because you have said that men who act like men are bad, that toxic masculinity exists, and that it is bad for society for men like Daniel Penny to exist. Men who are going to be aggressive and be physical and are going to stick up for women. These kind of traits have been characterized as, or I shouldn't say characterized, I should say caricatured as toxic. The code of chivalry. It doesn't exist anymore. You open a door for a woman and she'll tell you how she can do it herself and she don't need no man. And you say, oh, well, I'm just being polite. Okay. And then these same women who are then abused by men say, well, why don't the men do anything to help us? You can't have it both ways. You need men to act like men. There's a difference between what women want and what should be. So what women want right now, what the feminists want, are weak men. They want those, you see them all the time, the really, really soft-shelled men who talk softly and maybe end everything like a question mark, where they kind of talk like this, and they are very in touch with their feelings and their emotions, and they are more than happy to be the shoulder that you cry on about why your boyfriend is so mean. Those are the guys that they want, the feminized men. And those are not good men. They're not. They're bad men. Weak men are bad men, because there's a difference between what you think you want, which is this feminized, weak men, and what society should want, which is peaceful man. And I'm going to paraphrase the quote because I don't remember it entirely, but it's something like, a man who is not capable of violence is not peaceful. He's weak, because you can't do anything. So what you don't want is not a weak man. You want a peaceful man. And a peaceful man is a man who is capable of great violence and chooses not to use it. That's a man like Daniel Penny. You're talking about, and I don't know, and maybe he's a bad example. I don't know everything about that man's life, but just in this example I'm laying out here, a man who is not using his violence to terrorize other people or to harass women or to hurt people, but a man who uses his violence to stop the violence of other men. It's like that argument that a bad guy with a gun is only ever going to be beaten by a good guy with a gun. That is true. If you are a mass shooter or you're a bad person, you're out there terrorizing people, the only way that they stop is if you run out of bullets or if a good guy clobbers you upside the head and subdues you. That's the only way those people stop. And the good men who are willing to do that are going to be fewer and far between, because they've been told that those kind of traits are not desirable. It's not true. It's all a lie. Those are very desirable traits, but they've been told that. They're told that they shouldn't be that. That's toxic masculinity, that idea, that aggression. Aggression has to be taken out of young men. You don't want young men without aggression. What you want is young men who turn their aggression towards something good. Protecting other people is good. You can't have, for example, a military or a police force that does not have aggressive men in it. You can't have it. It doesn't exist because everyone wants to sit down and talk about their feelings and play tea party, and that's not what the job of a police officer or the military is about. The job of a police officer or the military is to take that aggression and turn it against bad people. That's the job. That's the goal. That's the idea. But they've been told that this is bad. And it's all part of the pendulum. What happens in the history of the United States is there's a pendulum effect. So you get something that, we'll just take the example that is relevant to this. So racism in the United States was terrible. Slavery is a horrible institution. It's bad. And then you have 100 years after slavery of Jim Crow and fighting for equality and rights and everything up until the 1960s, 1970s, when equality under the law began to get better, not perfect, but better. And then you have what in the 90s looked like an over-incarceration problem, where people said, well, we're arresting black people at a higher rate, and we had all these laws that targeted crack more than cocaine, and it disproportionately affected the black community, and blah, 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 blah. So you have now a move towards criminal justice reform, and the demonization of police, especially following the Ferguson riots in St. Louis. And so you have these two things, criminal justice reform, this demonization of the police, that have led to the pendulum swinging back the other way. And it's in the process right now. You're seeing district attorneys who have embraced that thing like no cash bail, and we're not going to prosecute low-level offenses like shoplifting or misdemeanor theft or any of this. And you're seeing the pendulum start to swing back the other way because people like Chesa Bodine in San Francisco or Kim Gardner here in St. Louis, these DAs are now getting recalled because people realize that when you don't prosecute criminals, you're not helping the black community because, and I know this is going to shock some people, because the black community are not a bunch of criminals. Criminals are criminals. Some of them happen to be black. When you don't prosecute black criminals because some misguided notion that it's a racism problem to arrest shoplifters because they happen to be black, then crime gets worse. And you're seeing that right now in New York. You're seeing it swing back the other way. New York had one of the most remarkable turnarounds in history, and they did that through aggressive policing in the 90s. The broken windows theory and stop and frisk, all these policies that now are derided as being racist in nature, they worked to curb crime in the United States. And you know who that helps? It helps low-income communities, which are disproportionately black. That's who it's helping. It's not helping in Manhattan to police low-level crime because low-level crime is not happening in Manhattan. It's happening in the Bronx, and it's happening in the other boroughs of New York. It's happening in Queens. It's happening in the Bronx. It's happening in Brooklyn. It's not happening where the richest, most powerful people live. That's not where the low-level crime is. That's not where the broken windows and the graffiti are. That's not there. It's not where the purse snatchings and the carjackings and all these crimes are happening. That what you do is you police those. You aggressively police those. People like Jordan Neely never would have died if he had gone to jail for any of the crimes he had committed and he had stayed there. That's how you get people's mental health under control. And that's how you get, because a guy like him who maybe he's schizophrenic, maybe he was just on drugs, whatever the case may be, that's where you get him medical help. That's where you get him the detoxing that he might need to come out of this, whatever is propelling him towards this craziness that makes him break the law 50 times. These people need help, I agree. But unless you want to involuntarily commit people to mental institutions for extended periods of time, which I'm also not against, or you send them to jail, because you can't just have mentally ill people on the street assaulting other people. That is not the solution. It's not the solution for anyone. It didn't make Jordan Neely's life better. living on the street, living in his own filth, not eating, not drinking, and then committing crimes that affected other people, that doesn't make his life better. He's not living the libertarian notion of free will. So either jail or a mental institution. I'm fine with either, but you can't tell me that the policies, this lax on crime, has been good for anybody. Who is it good for? Is it good because there were 200 people in New York City who were responsible for 10,000 arrests? Is that good? Is that a good thing that we let the same career criminals out to terrorize people over and over and over again? And this pendulum, what always happens is it swings back. So you had, if we'll do a little demonstration here, the pendulum swings. Over here at the beginning of the nation, you have racism, you have slavery, you have terrible things. And then we start to swing. We swing slowly. It takes way too long. But we get to the 60s and 70s where the majority of white Americans were also pro civil rights. Because, by the way, that's the only way it happens. The black population was less than 13% of the population in the 60s. If it was only black people who wanted civil rights, it never would have happened. So the majority of white people also were saying, we're going to fight racism. It's great. And then what happens is the pendulum swings back again. We have a pushback. We have pushback on some of the policies. We have pushback on some of this. We have pushback on whatever. And then we have an overcorrection, you could say, in the 90s. I don't think so, but some people would argue this. You have what is amounted to an overcorrection, where all of a sudden then the policing came. And the policing in the 90s was so harsh and so anti-black and blah, 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 blah. Again, I don't agree with that assessment, but this is the argument that would be made. And then we swung back. And now we're swinging back too far in response to these policies from the 90s, where now the problem is not crime. The problem is the way that we police. The problem is the way that we've structured our entire judicial system, because that's the real issue. And so now what we're going to see is a swing back. And this swing back, I hope it's moderate, but who knows? Because people don't like crime. Nobody does. The black community is not pro-crime. There's not a bunch of people in North St. Louis who are very thankful that they live in North St. Louis, where the crime is. They don't want that. If you could take up all the criminals in North St. Louis, you'd say, oh, wow, who does that help? Well, it's not white people who live up there. It's not white people who are living above Del Mar. It's black people. It helps black people to police crime. It's not helping me. It doesn't help me. I don't live there. And so you say, you know what? But in New York, it's different because everyone rides the subway. And everyone who's been on a subway in New York knows that when you get the homeless dude without a shirt yelling on the subway car, what they do is they just avoid eye contact and try to pretend to be invisible. That's not a society you want to live in. You don't want a society where you're having to worry about offending or aggroing the homeless person in the subway car. That's not the society we want to live in. But that's the society that people have set up. That's a society that liberals in liberal cities have set up. The criminals are not the bad guys. It's the police. It's the DAs. It's the prosecuting attorneys. It's the judges. It's the jails. Those are the issue. It's not the issue. And the demonization of men is going to lead for them not to protect you. And the demonization of the criminal justice system is not going to lead to criminals all of a sudden realizing that crime doesn't pay. Criminals realize that crime doesn't pay because punishment. That's the only way. You don't hear about people who commit a whole bunch of murders, never get charged, and then say, I just changed my ways because why? What is the incentive? The incentive is you go to jail forever. You go to the electric chair. Those are the incentives. It's not you commit shoplifting, they arrest you, they let you out. You commit shoplifting again, they arrest you, they let you out the same day. What happens to you? Nothing. I go shoplift. They arrest me or they don't. I go to jail, but then I'm released. No cash, bond, no nothing. I just go back on the street. And so that's why you see these same people. And again, I think it was like 200 people in New York who were responsible for 10,000 arrests. That's ridiculous. Send those people to prison. What's wrong with you? But Councilwoman Faraz would vote against that. She's the one who says, oh, Jordan Neely's the victim. Oh, the people who shoplift, they're the real victims. They're just the unhoused because they're stealing bread for their family. They stole bread 10,000 times. No, they didn't. No, they're not. And that's not true. But that's what she'll tell you. And then you look around. You say, first they came for the masculinity, and then I looked around and they came from, there was only me to come for, right? It's a paraphrasing of that old anti-Soviet poem. They always come, whatever you think they're going to go for first, whether it's masculinity or criminal justice reform, it always leads to you being done at the end. That's it. That's the way it happens. You can't tell men not to be men. And then when the bad men come, you have nothing but a bunch of weak beta males who can't stand up for you. And then you say, how did this happen? You're the reason it happened. You surrounded yourself with a bunch of effeminate men who don't know how to protect you. And then when the bad men come with the big stick, you say, oh my God, there's no one left to protect us. People like Daniel Penny will not always exist when you tell them that they're going to go to prison for defending you. You cannot incentivize people to stand up for you. And it's just a misguided notion by people. And I wish it was different, because the reality is that men like that will exist, but they just might not step up. It's like for example, if I saw somebody doing something in the street, hurting other people, this actually happened to me probably 6-7 months ago. I was coming out of the back door of my building, and there were these three kids, three quote-unquote kids, but they were having a fist fight behind my building. Get down. What's wrong with you? They were having a fist fight behind my building, and the cat's on one today. And when I came outside, these two guys had this kid, probably 14, 15, on the ground. They're punching him. And I stood there for about 3 or 4 seconds, and I said, oh, crap. All right, well, I got to say something. I said, hey, you damn kids, what's going on? Knock it off. You're trying to be the adult. And then these two kids, probably, again, 14, 15 years old, these two kids spun and squared up with me. They're probably 10 feet away from me. I had a pile of clothes in my hand. I put them on the ground. I said, oh, my God, I'm going to have to fight these kids. How many people walk out of the back door when a 14-year-old is on the ground being stomped by two other boys and don't say anything? Because they can't say anything. Because one, those three kids were black. So if I had to fight two kids in the street, then I'm going to be the bad guy. Because all of a sudden everyone will be like, oh my God, this 33-year-old white man beat up two 15-year-old black kids. I'd be like, well, they were stomping on the third one who I was trying to help. But I could already see it now. That would be how it goes. How many people don't say anything in that scenario? If it's a woman, they say, oh my God, I'm going to call the police. And then what, go inside while she continues to be stomped? Is that what you're going to do? Is that what you want men to do? Anyway, I don't know. I don't know the solution. I know men will always be men, but you have to incentivize them to be the kind of people who want to help you. And then don't be surprised when they don't. If you set the system up in the opposite way, don't be surprised when they act in an opposite manner. You want people like Daniel Penny, but then you also want to send Daniel Penny to jail. You don't get it both ways, and I feel like women don't understand that right now. You can't call men toxic and then say, why won't the good men step up and protect us? It doesn't work that way. It never will. There will always be good men. There will always be men who are willing to step up and protect people, but you have to incentivize them to do it. You have to make them the kind of men who have those skills, have that mindset, but also are not afraid to be the ones who step up. And this is asking too much of New York, but it's not asking too much of other states. New York is the kind of state where if you own a building and someone pops up a tent in your roof, then you have to let them live there for the rest of forever because all of a sudden they have some sort of rights to your building. The squatters' rights thing is a whole podcast I'd like to do one on. But it's the same kind of deal. Your rights are going to be infringed so that made-up rights for other people can take their place. Like you have a right to threaten people on the subway. You don't. But your right to self-defense does exist, and New York will learn that one way or the other. People are going to either leave or the whole system is going to collapse because you cannot incentivize criminals to do criminal shit and then expect your society to flourish. It's not going to work. Anyway, we're getting a little too ranty today. This one boggles my mind. Good men out there. Be men. Act tough. It's not that you shouldn't have feelings, but damn it, do what's right and protect the people you love. That's your job as a man. That is your responsibility. to do those things. So be the kind of man who can. Don't be a weak man. Be a peaceful man. Anyway, we're going to leave it there for the week. I'll catch you guys next Friday. Have a good one.